What does it take to build a god? In a world that worships images, some don't just play the game, they create it. They sculpt a persona so perfect, so universally beloved, that it becomes an impenetrable armor. But every armor hides something. A vulnerability, a strategy, or perhaps a cold, calculated darkness. Today, here on The Truth, Dark Psychology, we're not going to talk about the actor you love, but about the archetype he represents and the psychological tools he may have used to dominate the world without anyone realizing his true face. If you are fascinated by what lies behind the masks, subscribe, like, and comment. The truth is always more complex than fiction. To understand the public figure we know, it's crucial to separate the man from the product. The Brad Pitt the world consumes is not simply an actor, but one of the most successful and meticulously constructed brands in pop culture. This construction doesn't happen by chance. It is the result of decades of strategic choices, calculated associations, and above all, the projection of an ideal. He represents the perfect balance between the sensitive rebel and the reliable gentleman, an archetype that appeals to an immense spectrum of the public. This duality is not just natural charisma. It is a work of perception engineering where every role, every public appearance, and every interview adds another layer to this almost mythical persona. The psychology behind this construction involves the creation of an idealized self. By consistently presenting an image of humility, talent, and an unpretentious charm, the Brad Pitt brand generates a deep emotional resonance with the public. People don't just admire his films. They admire the idea of the man he appears to be. This creates a powerful affinity bias, where the audience is predisposed to like him and forgive his flaws, as criticizing him would be like criticizing an ideal they themselves aspire to or admire. It's a subtle form of control where the audience is. Loyalty is won not through actions, but through the maintenance of a symbol. This image architecture also manifests in his risk aversion in public statements. We rarely see him involved in verbal controversies or opinions that might alienate a portion of his audience. His discourse is often measured, focused on universal themes like art, introspective masculinity, and overcoming adversity. This is not necessarily a sign of a lack of opinion, but rather of extremely disciplined narrative control. From a dark psychology perspective, this is the use of silence and neutrality as a weapon. By remaining vague and universal, he becomes a mirror, allowing millions of people to project their own hopes and ideals onto him, thereby strengthening the brand without ever committing to anything that could tarnish it. The control over this image extends beyond his own actions to his associations. The choice of partners, both in his personal and professional life, has always seemed to complement and strengthen his image. From Jennifer Aniston, America's sweetheart, to Angelina Jolie, the global humanitarian and icon of strength, his relationships were never just private matters, but part of the public narrative. This selection, whether conscious or not, functions as a character endorsement. If such admirable people love him, he must be worthy of that admiration. It's a validation by proxy, a social manipulation technique that consolidates status and the perception of integrity. Finally, the longevity of this flawless brand reveals a deep understanding of mass psychology. Brad Pitt's image has survived scandals that would have destroyed other careers, and this is due to the solid foundation built over many years. When accusations or negative narratives arise, they collide with a wall of accumulated goodwill and admiration. The public, trained for decades to see him in a certain way, enters a state of cognitive dissonance, often preferring to reject the negative information rather than reevaluate an icon so deeply rooted in their imagination. This is the ultimate power of a perfectly curated image. It becomes self-protecting. One of the most fascinating and psychologically complex traits observed in charismatic figures is their ability to adapt and mirror those around them, creating an instant sense of connection and familiarity. Brad Pitt appears to be a master of this chameleonic art. Throughout his public life, we've noticed how his aesthetic and even his mannerisms seem to transform to complement his current partner. With Gwyneth Paltrow, they were the golden couple, with identical haircuts. With Jennifer Aniston, he embodied the laid-back California husband. With Angelina Jolie, he became the patriarch of a global tribe engaged in humanitarian causes. This is not just a man adapting. It is an identity-level mirroring technique. From the perspective of dark psychology, mirroring is an extremely effective manipulation tool. When someone mirrors our body language, our interests, and even our values, our brain interprets this as a sign of safety and belonging. He's just like me, we think, and our defenses lower. This technique creates a rapid and intense emotional bond, which can be used to influence and gain the other person's trust. In the context of romantic relationships, this can forge a powerful emotional dependency, where the partner feels uniquely understood, without realizing they might just be seeing a reflection of themselves. This chameleon-like ability also serves as a defense mechanism. By constantly molding himself to others, the central figure avoids having to reveal his true self, which may be complex, flawed, or simply different from what the public expects. The adaptable persona acts as a shield, maintaining a safe distance between the public image and the private reality. It is a survival strategy in an environment like Hollywood, where authenticity can be an exploitable weakness. Keeping others focused on the reflection they see ensures that no one gets close enough to see the cracks in the armor. The risk of this constant adaptation is the loss of a solid, core identity. Who is the real Brad Pitt when he isn't reflecting? Someone else? That is a question that perhaps even he cannot fully answer. Living a life of mirroring can lead to an inner void, a feeling of being a collection of personas rather than a singular individual. In interviews, he often talks about seeking authenticity and about identity crises, which could be a direct symptom of the psychological cost of being a chameleon for so long. The incessant search for new roles and new identities, both on and off the screen, may be an attempt to fill this void. Asterisk, for the observer, the lesson here is about the power of validation. We are all susceptible to people who make us feel seen and understood, but it is crucial to question the nature of that connection. Are we being genuinely appreciated for who we are, or are we just interacting with a skilled mirror that reflects what we want to see? Brad Pitt's ability to charm the world may lie precisely in this skill of making every person, whether a partner or a fan, feel they have found a kindred spirit, when in fact, they may have just found the master of adaptation. Beyond his acting career, Brad Pitt has cultivated an image as a benefactor, whether through his Make It Right Foundation to build homes in New Orleans, or his production company, Plan B, which supports films with a strong social conscience. On the surface, these acts are admirable and position him as a force for good. However, through the lens of dark psychology, we can analyze the savior complex, a behavioral pattern where a person seeks to help others to satisfy their own needs. For control, validation, and power, often unconsciously. The act of saving places the savior in a position of moral superiority and power over those being helped. Asterisk, the production company Plan B, for example, is responsible for acclaimed and culturally important films like 12 Years a Slave and Moonlight. By giving a voice to marginalized narratives, Pitt is not just making good cinema. He is positioning himself as a guardian of morality in Hollywood, a powerful white man who elevates the stories of others. While positive in its outcome, this reinforces a power dynamic where he is the facilitator, the savior of those stories that might not otherwise be told. The psychological question is not whether the projects are good, but what is the underlying need to assume this role as the patron of just causes? The savior complex can be an extremely subtle form of narrative control. By aligning himself with unquestionably noble causes any criticism of his person becomes more difficult. How can one attack a man who produces films about the black experience in America or builds houses for hurricane victims? This association with altruism acts as a moral shield, deflecting attention from more complex issues in his personal and professional life. It's a brilliant public relations strategy, where good deeds in one area create a halo effect that sanctifies the entire image. However, when the Savior's veil slips, the consequences can be devastating, as seen in the controversies surrounding the Make It Right Foundation, with allegations that the homes built were of poor quality and were deteriorating. This is the inherent risk of the Savior complex. It depends on perfect execution. When the promised help fails, it is seen not just as a mistake, but as a betrayal, a deep hypocrisy that shatters the foundation of the altruistic persona. A Savior's fall is always harder, as it reveals that the motivation may not have been purely benevolent, but linked to a need to be seen as such. Therefore, when analyzing the humanitarian and producer facet of Brad Pitt, we are forced to question the fine line between inspiration and control. Is it possible to do good for selfish reasons? Absolutely. The Savior complex teaches us that the noblest actions can be rooted in deep psychological needs, such as the desire to redeem past failures, to control one's own image, or to exercise power in a socially acceptable way. Altruism can, paradoxically, be one of the most sophisticated forms of public perception manipulation. No role defines the enigma of Brad Pitt as much as Tyler Durden in Fight Club. Durden is not just a character. He is an anarchic manifesto against conformity, an icon of toxic masculinity, and most importantly, the personification of the protagonist's psychological shadow. Jungian psychology defines the shadow as the parts of ourselves that we repress and deny. Tyler Durden is the shadow set free. The enduring fascination with this role suggests that it touched upon something real, not just in the culture, but perhaps within the actor who brought him so convincingly to life. Pitt's performance as Tyler Durden is magnetic because he exudes a dangerous authenticity. He embodies chaotic charisma, manipulative leadership, and the desire to destroy in order to rebuild. The question that dark psychology forces us to ask is, where did this profound understanding of the character come from? Talented actors can act, but the most legendary performances are those where the actor seems to channel an inner truth. The ease with which he embodied Durden's philosophy raises questions about his own internal struggles with fame, identity, and the repression required to maintain a flawless public image. The legacy of Tyler Durden echoes in the later controversies of Pitt's life. The allegations of aggressive behavior, substance abuse, and loss of control, especially those that emerged during his divorce from Angelina Jolie, seem to be a disturbing echo of the character. It's as if the shadow, so brilliantly portrayed on screen, was fighting to emerge in real life. Fight Club teaches us that the more we repress our shadow, the more destructively it can manifest. Brad Pitt's public persona, so calm and controlled, may be the direct opposite of a chaotic inner force he struggles to contain. This duality between Hollywood's golden boy and the dark figure of Tyler Durden represents the central conflict of his persona. On one hand, he is the perfect product of the system Durden wanted to destroy. On the other, he seems to carry within him the seed of rebellion against that very system. This tension is what makes him so captivating. He's not just a pretty face. There's an implied danger, a suggestion that beneath the surface, there's someone capable of breaking all the rules. This fascination with the bad boy, hidden within the good guy, is one of the keys to his enduring appeal. Ultimately, Fight Club serves as a psychological map for understanding the risks of a life lived in the spotlight. The pressure to be perfect, to repress anger, frustration, and unacceptable desires can create an opposing force within the psyche. Brad Pitt's story, seen through the lens of Tyler Durden, is a cautionary tale about the price of genius and image. What happens when the man who sold the image of perfection to the world grows tired of his own creation? The answer might be chaos. We are only halfway through unraveling this complex mind. If this analysis is making you question everything you thought you knew, then we're doing our job. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to The Truth, Dark Psychology, and most importantly, comment below with which other public figure you'd like us to analyze. The most interesting masks are always the best made ones. Now let's get back to the darkness. The divorce between Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie was not just the end of a relationship. It was the demolition of a global myth. Brangelina was more than a couple. It was a brand, an ideal of a modern, powerful, and altruistic family. When this fairy tale crumbled amidst shocking allegations of abuse and controlling behavior, the public was forced to confront the possibility that the image they had consumed for years was a facade. One of the most disturbing concepts that emerged from the allegations was gaslighting, a form of psychological manipulation where the abuser makes the victim doubt their own sanity and perception of reality. The detailed allegations by Jolie, including the infamous plane incident, paint a picture of a man whose cold charm could turn into volatile anger, leaving those around him questioning what was real. After the incident, the public narrative, skillfully managed by Pitt's team, tended to portray him as the victim of a smear campaign, a flawed man battling his demons, but an essentially good one. This strategy is a classic example of how power and influence can be used to shape public perception and potentially invalidate the victim's experience, a form of macro-scale gaslighting. The power of charisma in the practice of gaslighting is immense. A universally beloved person like Brad Pitt holds an almost inexhaustible credit of trust with the public. When accusations arise against him, the instinctive reaction of many is to defend the icon they know and love rather than believe the narrative that contradicts him. The charismatic manipulator exploits this, relying on their reputation to make the victim's version seem exaggerated, irrational, or malicious. The victim is not only fighting the abuser, but also the public image he has meticulously built over decades. The custody battle and subsequent legal disputes revealed a struggle for narrative control. Each side presented a drastically different version of events, leaving the public in the middle of an information war. However, Pitt's persona, built on a foundation of likability and charm, gave him an inherent advantage. He remained largely silent, projecting a stoic dignity, while Jolie's claims were often portrayed by the media as dramatic or vindictive. This is the mechanism of gaslighting in action, silencing the victim by making them appear unstable, while the perpetrator maintains calm and control. The collapse of Brangelina offers us a brutal lesson about the psychology of power dynamics. It demonstrates that even in the most glamorous settings, the dynamics of control and manipulation can be present. Gaslighting does not require yelling or explicit physical violence. It operates in subtlety, in denial, in the distortion of truth, until the victim feels isolated and begins to doubt themselves. The Hollywood fairy tale became a dark case study on how charm can be used to hide and perpetuate psychological control, leaving scars that are invisible to the public eye. In the age of overexposure, where celebrities share every moment of their lives, one of Brad Pitt's most potent tools of power has been his strategic silence. He rarely gives intimate interviews, avoids social media, and when confronted with controversy, his standard response is a dignified silence or a carefully crafted statement through representatives. This inaccessibility is not a weakness. It is a powerful psychological weapon. Silence creates a vacuum, and human nature, especially fan culture, abhors a vacuum. They fill it with mystery, speculation, and more often than not, with the idealized version they want to be true. By refusing to participate in the 24-hour news cycle, Pitt elevates himself above it. He doesn't stoop to the level of debunking every rumor or responding to every provocation. This posture conveys an air of unshakable power and control. Psychologically, this positions him as the authority figure in his own narrative. While others react, he acts, or rather, chooses not to act, forcing the world to wait for his next move. This is the power of withholding. By giving less, he makes every small crumb of information he offers seem more valuable and significant. This use of silence was crucial during his divorce. As details leaked and accusations emerged, his refusal to publicly engage in the fray allowed him to maintain an aura of moral high ground. He seemed to be taking the high road, while the other party appeared to be airing dirty laundry in public. This tactic exploits a social bias that often mistakes silence for strength and emotional expression for weakness or hysteria. It's a form of perception manipulation that plays on the public's expectations and prejudices, allowing him to win the public relations war without firing a single verbal shot. Asterisk. Inaccessibility also enhances his market value and his charisma. In a world where everyone is desperately seeking attention, the one who avoids it becomes infinitely more intriguing. His silence makes him a blank canvas for the public's projections. He can be the tortured artist, the suffering father, the stoic icon. He can be whatever we want him to be because he rarely tells us who he is. This intentional ambiguity is what fuels the myth and keeps the fascination alive. If he explained everything, the mystery would vanish, and with it, a part of his power. The psychological lesson here is about the power of controlling the flow of information. In our own lives, we often feel the pressure to respond, explain, and justify ourselves immediately. Pitt's strategy shows us that power can lie in the opposite, in observing, in waiting, and in speaking only when it is strategically advantageous. Silence is not empty. It is a space filled with power. By mastering the art of inaccessibility, Brad Pitt has not only protected his image, but has turned it into an enigmatic fortress that few can penetrate. Behind every perfectly curated image, there's a psychological cost. The pressure to maintain the golden mask of Brad Pitt, the sexiest man, the talented actor, the conscious producer, the ideal father, must be immense, living a life under constant scrutiny, where every gesture is analyzed and every potential flaw can become a global scandal, requires a superhuman level of self-control and repression. This is not a life lived freely, but a constant performance, where the actor can never leave the stage. The price of this performance is authenticity itself. Pitt's own confessions about his struggles with alcohol and depression, especially after his separation, offer a rare glimpse behind the curtain. These moments of vulnerability suggest that the flawless facade was taking its toll. Substance abuse, in this context, can be seen as a coping mechanism, an attempt to silence the anxiety and cognitive dissonance of living a life that is not entirely one's own. It is the shadow rebelling against the blinding light of the public persona, desperate attempt to feel something real in a world of fiction, the pursuit of increasingly complex and dark roles, and the dedication to his production company plan. B can also be interpreted as a search for meaning beyond the superficiality of fame. By immersing himself in stories of pain, injustice, and redemption, he may be trying to process his own internal complexities in a safe and creative way. Art becomes therapy, a space where he can explore the facets of himself that the golden mask does not allow. It's a way to connect with the darkness without having to embody it in his public life, a precarious balance between the persona and the soul. The paradox of Pitt's genius and success is that the very thing that made him icon, his perfectly controlled image, is also his psychological prison. He has built a gilded cage for himself. Any deviation from the Brad Pitt brand is seen as a catastrophic failure. This creates a vicious cycle. The pressure to be perfect leads to repression. Repression leads to escapist behaviors or outbursts. And these outbursts threaten the perfect image, increasing the pressure to control it even more. It is a heavy burden that few of us could bear. The final lesson from the psychology of Brad Pitt is not about admiration or condemnation, but about compassion and caution. He shows us that the pursuit of perfection is a dangerous trap. The golden mask, though attractive, consumes the one who wears it. He forces us to question our own cult of celebrity and the image we project to the world. By deconstructing the myth, we do not destroy the man, but perhaps we humanize him, recognizing that behind the cold charm and the calculated image, there is an individual struggling with the same forces of light and shadow that exist within. U.S. all. The truth, as always, is complex, uncomfortable, and profoundly human. The mask has been analyzed, but the questions remain. The truth is rarely an answer, but rather a constant pursuit. Thank you for joining us on another deep investigation. Here at The Truth, Dark Psychology. If you believe that truth should be questioned and appearances deconstructed, then this is your channel. Subscribe, turn on notifications so you don't miss our next dive into the human psyche, and leave your comment below. Who is Brad Pitt to you? A genius of charisma or a master of manipulation? The discussion continues in the comments. Until next time.